I would like to introduce our faculty speaker, who is Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster. General McMaster is the Fuad and Michelle Ajami Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution, Stanford University. He's also the Bernard and Susan Leotoad Fellow at the Freeman Spogli Institute and lecturer at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. Upon graduation from the U.S. Military Academy, General McMaster served as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army for 34 years. He retired as a lieutenant general in June 2018 after serving as the 25th assistant to the President for National Security Affairs. From 2014 to 17, General McMaster designed the future Army as the director of the Army Capabilities Integration Center, the Deputy Commanding General of the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command, TRADOC. As Commanding General of the Maneuver Center of Excellence at Fort Benning, he oversaw all of the training and education for the Army's infantry, armor, and cavalry force. General McMaster commanded organizations in wartime and served overseas as an advisor to the most senior commanders in the Middle East, Iraq, and Afghanistan. General McMaster holds a PhD in military history from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He was an assistant professor of history at West Point. He is the author of best-selling books. In fact, his dissertation became a very good book called Battlegrounds, the Fight to Defend the Free World and the Dereliction of Duty, Lyndon Johnson, Robert McNamara, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Lies That Led to Vietnam. He has also written books since he returned to us at Stanford that deal with grand strategy and with the organization and his experiences in the United States government. So please join me in welcoming General H.R. McMaster as the speaker today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, hey, what a privilege it is to be with everybody. Congratulations, graduates. You're looking great. And I want to thank Professor Fukuyama for your leadership and vision of this great institution. Professor McFall, Professor Aturapane, faculty, staff, families, guests, and especially graduates of the class of 2025. Thank you for the privilege of being with you on this amazing day and for this wonderful occasion. First, congratulations to our graduates, and congratulations as well to all those who supported the graduates in their studies. It is a great honor to deliver this commencement address to you. So since I arrived at Stanford 7 years ago, I noticed that many of my students, because you're kind of all overachievers here at Stanford, many of my students were anxious about their post-graduation employment. Many wanted to hear my thoughts about what was the perfect sequence of jobs in the public and private sectors for them to reach their long-term goals. I would recommend don't worry about it. When I married my wife, Katie, who is here with us today, I told her that my plan was to leave the Army after my 5-year commitment. In the speech roasting me at my retirement from the Army in 2018, Katie told that story, looked at me and said, "Thank you for the bonus 29 years." But I found service in the U.S. Army too rewarding to leave, even though I rarely got my preferred assignment. I mean, who would have thought that Fort Irwin, California, in the middle of the Mojave Desert, 40 miles north of the cultural center of Barstow, California, would be one of our most fun tours of duty. So when evaluating opportunities, I think it's useful to ask 3 questions. Is it a mission you care about? Will you have the responsibility and autonomy necessary for you to make a difference? And are your bosses and your colleagues people with whom you want to serve? If the answer to those questions is yes, you cannot go wrong. And years hence, as you look back on your career, you could not have imagined the path that you ultimately take. So Chan Lim, Marcus Magana, Emerson Johnston, Joe Wishart, and others with military service might relate particularly with this observation about my 34 years in the U.S. Army, but I imagine it is an observation that resonates across experiences in governmental, international, and private sector organizations. As a newly commissioned lieutenant in one of your first operations or missions, you might look around and see the things, they're not going as planned. We have an acronym for that in the military, because we have an acronym for everything in the military, and it's SNAFU, situation normal, all fouled up. Maybe it's not fouled in some context, but while you acknowledge the friction or the confusion, you have faith as a junior officer. You say to yourself, hey, somebody up there must have a plan. Then you're a mid-career officer, maybe you're a captain, a major, and you look around, the situation is disordered, maybe units of leaders are unsure about what to do, and it dawns on you, I don't think anybody up there has a plan. And then maybe you continue to serve in the military long enough to reach senior command or the general officer ranks, and you assess that your organization is a little bit unclear about its mission, its goals, its objectives are maybe ambiguous. People lack an understanding of the situation and how leaders expect the team to work together to achieve favorable outcomes. It is at that moment when it should dawn on you that it's your job to make the plan. So California Senator Leland Stanford and his wife Jane founded this place, Stanford University, in 1885 to promote the public welfare by exercising an influence in behalf of humanity and civilization. As I read your biographies, the biographies of the graduates, I was certain that the Stanfords would be delighted to see that these graduates have the competence and commitment necessary to fulfill that mission. Almost a century later, the Institute for International Studies, IIS, which was then renamed later in recognition of a generous donation from Stanford alumni Bradford Freeman and Ronald Spogli, took up the mission to prepare future leaders, you, and influence policymaking in pursuit of solutions to the most critical global issues. So as young leaders who hold the Ford Dorsey Masters in International Policy degree, you are well prepared not only to make the plan, but also to implement the plan. And you are leaders who will provide your teams with what the U.S. Army describes as purpose, motivation, and direction. We need to lead because too many people are suffering from violence and repression. We need you to lead because wars have cascaded from Europe to Africa to the Middle East and may cascade further across South Asia and into the Indo-Pacific region. We need you to lead because threats in cyberspace are increasing due to the rise of artificial intelligence and the connection of so much of our critical infrastructure to the internet. We need you to lead because space is weaponized and the most destructive weapons on Earth are proliferating. We need you to lead because authoritarian regimes are finding new ways to stifle human freedom, oppress their people, and police people's thoughts. We need you to lead because the interconnected problems of energy security, climate change, water security, food security, and environmental security are becoming more vexing. We need you to lead because many people around the world have lost confidence in the ability of their governmental and international institutions to achieve fair and favorable outcomes. But maybe most of all, we need you to lead to help restore our sense of agency, our faith that we can work together to build a better future for generations to come. So, look on the bright side. That litany of problems means job security for leaders like you, with the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And the millennials and Gen Zers in this class might thank me and the other boomers and Gen Xers here on the faculty and staff for bequeathing to you such a broad range of critical problems to work on. But despite the litany of problems and many others that we could all list, I am optimistic about our future. I'm optimistic because of you. It is hard for me to imagine a group of people better prepared for the challenges and opportunities you will face. Your biographies are filled with impressive combinations of language skills, service as diplomats and military officers, cross-cultural immersion experiences, and technological expertise. You are now graduates of a program that emphasizes competence and the ability to formulate and especially implement effective policies. You are now part of an international community. Let's call it a family that as Professor Fukuyama mentioned, spans across the United States, the United Kingdom, South Korea, Indonesia, Tanzania, China, Ukraine, Germany, Japan, Lebanon, Sri Lanka, and Belgium. But as you depart Stanford and reflect on what you have learned in the area of strategic competence, or what I think of as the ability to integrate all elements of national power and efforts of like-minded partners to achieve well-defined objectives, I ask that you consider how you might overcome what may be this biggest challenge we face, the need to restore confidence in our ability to work together to improve our world. I believe that lack of confidence derives in part from isolation. Social isolation weakens the bonds that foster understanding and compassion. In his book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam highlighted this danger, observing that people divorced from community, occupation, and association are first and foremost among the supporters of extremism. Putnam published that book in the year 2000, before social media connected us better than ever electronically, while driving us apart from one another emotionally and psychologically. In his recent Atlantic Monthly essay, The Antisocial Century, Derek Thompson explained how the combination of digital connection and self-imposed solitude has reduced exposure to differing viewpoints and made society and democracy weaker, meaner, and more delusional. So the first step to restoring confidence might be to stay connected to one another and keep the community view you've built among your classmates strong. Then you might resolve to extend your community further and pull in some of the people who've been isolated. The trend toward individual solitude is matched with calls in the United States and elsewhere for disengagement or retrenchment. In the United States, nativists or self-described realists argue that America has problems of its own and should abandon what they call liberal hegemony to prioritize domestic policy. They have joined with unlikely fellow travelers from the postmodernist New Left, who ascribe all of the ills of the world almost exclusively to the legacy of colonialism and, since the end of the colonial era, U.S.-led capitalist imperialism. Both groups engage in what we might call strategic narcissism, because they define the world only in relation to the United States and fail to acknowledge that other actors have authorship over the future and have ambitions and aspirations that extend far beyond reactions to U.S. policy. So you might resolve to explain to your fellow citizens and international partners that disengagement from our interconnected world, analogous to the Ming Dynasty's inward turn and destruction of its treasure fleet in the 15th and 16th centuries, is not a good idea. We know from much more recent experiences that problems that develop abroad, from pandemics to jihadist terrorism to man-made carbon emissions and other forms of pollution, can only be dealt with at an exorbitant price once they reach our homes. In addition to social isolation and calls for retrenchment, we might also recognize a third source of our self-doubt: the neo-Marxist tendency to organize the world into hapless victims and privileged oppressors. Once confined mainly to academia, this way of understanding the world has infected the broader culture, polarized communities, and has reinforced calls for isolation and disengagement. The combination of the valorization of victimhood, a tendency to view people as fragile creatures who must be protected from all threats, including language, and the habitual insertion of the adjectives institutional or structural in front of every problem, robs people of agency and leaves them with a toxic combination of anger and resignation. Resignation and the mild form of self-loathing associated with postmodernist and various critical theories and reified philosophies therefore cedes the initiative to those who would undermine security and freedom, and prevents us from working together to imagine ways to restore peace, advance freedom and human rights, improve security, and promote prosperity. So you might challenge these theories and philosophies by asking simple questions like, isn't it possible to celebrate our diverse cultures while acknowledging that our common humanity provides a foundation for working together to achieve the vision of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, as was described in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Or does it make sense to judge one another based on identity category rather than a person's base motivation of their character or what's in their heart or their soul? Or could overwrought concerns over cultural appropriation and other elements of post-colonial theory erode our ability to empathize with one another? Empathy, or the ability to share feelings and perspectives of others, is, I believe, vital to restoring our sense of agency and our ability to work together. A lack of empathy is rooted in ignorance, I believe. Those who know the least about issues often seek affirmation of their biases rather than knowledge. They judge their neighbors rather than try to understand their perspectives. But fortunately, a Stanford professor of psychology, Jamil Zaki, observed in his book, The War for Kindness, Building Empathy in a Fractured World, empathy is a skill we can develop, a muscle that we can train and strengthen. Empathy can help us break through social isolation. And empathy can help us counter narcissistic arguments for retrenchment or disengagement. The historian Zachary Shore makes the case for strategic empathy based on the recognition that others exercise influence and authorship over our collective future. He urges us to understand better the emotions, aspirations, and ideologies that drive and constrain others, including rivals and adversaries. And empathy reveals limitations in deterministic views of history and helps us realize that we are not condemned to walk down a preordained path. So my main message to you today is, do not underestimate how influential you can be and the difference you can make in our world. You will face challenges and disappointments, but your support for one another will help you keep your positive outlook on humanity and sustain your confidence. When I had the privilege of leading soldiers in combat against the enemies of all civilized peoples, I bore witness to moral and physical evils that shook my faith. But I witnessed good soldiers and ordinary people persevere, stand up to, and triumph over those evils in a way that strengthened my faith in God and in humanity. As the theme of this talk is agency and confidence that we can build a better future, I'd like to end with a Clinton quotation. And of course, I'm referring to George Clinton of the funk band Parliament Funkadelic. Okay, all right, I imagine this is an ending that's surprising to you, because generals are not, in general, known to be funky, okay? But the lyrics they're both funky and they're on topic. They're from the second track on the 1972 album, America Eats Its Young. There was a crisis of confidence in America due to an unpopular war in Vietnam, stagflation, a presidential scandal, and doubts about our ability to overcome political and social divisions and reduce racial and other forms of inequality. So here are the lyrics that George delivered over a moody groove and a tight bass line. If you don't like the effects, don't produce the cause. If you say you don't like, if you say you don't like where you're at, you can make a change. Situation is just that. It has no special powers to do you harm. It's your reactions that count. Congratulations to the class of 2025, and thank you for all you will do to restore agency, regain our strategic confidence, and become not only one nation, but one world under a groove. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you, and congratulations. Congratulations.